Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
When I was a kid, I used to live in this woodsy area in Vermont. There were few other kids to play with, and my only sibling was still a baby, so I learned to play on my own. Throughout my time as a child, I spawned various imaginary friends to stave off the boredom I faced with little interaction with other children. Naturally, my curiosity got the better of me and I began to explore the woods. There were trails that intersected and diverged all throughout the woods, and it wasn't uncommon to find other people walking along them. It did catch me off guard one day when I saw two other kids walking along the trail I was on. I was excited and went to meet them. One was a boy, Tyler, slightly older than me, and the other was his sister, Katie, who was slightly younger than me. They lived at a house about 10 minutes away from mine, but the only way to reach it was through the woods. Over time, we met and began to play more and more often. Tyler and I became good friends, and we started to leave Katie out of our fun a bit, because she was younger and a girl. Of course, this upset her, and she began to hate me whenever I came over to play with her brother. But being the cruel children we were, it just added a bit of sadistic pleasure to it. Tyler and I began a makeshift map of the woods, using our houses as the central location. We searched quite a bit in all directions, and this tended to fill our days and went into the night. My parents, while happy I made a friend, began to worry over my venture into the woods and started to put time limitations on how long I could stay out. Tyler's parents seemed to agree with mine and sent Katie with us to make sure we listened. Katie was excited about our first day out together but ignored me almost entirely, only speaking up to argue with my suggestion of where to go next. After one particular vocal debate on her end, I snapped at her. She immediately teared up and ran away. I tried to chase after her, but Tyler grabbed my arm before I could take more than one step.
She'll just go back home, let's keep going.
I assumed he knew his sister better than I did and went with him. We explored out a bit until we hit a large river. We toyed a bit with the idea of crossing it, but relented when we saw the sun's position in the sky. It would be dark by the time we got back anyway. As we followed the map back to our houses, we made mental notes of what trees could be used to make raft, or what might be a faster route to the river. It was just starting to darken outside when we heard a voice. A young girl and what sounded like an older man. We almost shrugged it off until Tyler bolted towards the voices. I tried to ask what was going on until I realized what he heard. The girl's voice was Katie. We kept moving until we came to a slight mossy rise overlooking the clearing where the voices were coming from. Deciding it would be stupid to just run in there, we flattened out on the rise and scouted out the situation. In the middle of the clearing was Katie, but there was no man. Katie was looking at something though. We just couldn't see from our vantage point. As we rounded the rise and went into the clearing, Katie became aware of us. She turned with a smile towards Tyler and a scowl towards me. She waved Tyler over, saying,
"Come quick, meet my friend, Bella." Or was it Bali?
The male voice was heard again. It was a guttural sound that left ringing in my ears. Like whatever the noise was, it wasn't meant to be made by that throat.
The name is not important now, my dear, but I must leave now. We will meet again soon, I promise.
Katie rushed forward towards the trees at the opposite edge of the clearing, telling the man to stop. Tyler immediately went after her. I just stood there wondering what the hell that was. The thing wasn't human as far as I could tell. It was slightly higher than my waist. I couldn't see any details on it though besides its eyes, which were yellow with horizontal rectangular slits. Like a goat. It left after it finished its sentence, and there was no sight of it. We never saw it leave. It seemingly disappeared. Tyler and I were creeped out knowing this wasn't normal, but Katie thought it was some type of magical being like in Disney movies. In fact, she said that Bella told her she could become a princess if she kept talking to him. And what girl didn't want to become a princess? Tyler warned her away from talking to the thing and threatened to tell his parents about it. It was an empty threat because we both knew that either his parents would think he was lying or that they would believe him and not allow him to go into the woods anymore. After that, we took a break from exploring for a few days. Each of us tried to come up with an explanation as to what the hell that thing was and were too scared that we might face it ourselves. Katie held no such apprehension and would sneak past her brother early to go into the woods. Tyler did tell his parents about that. After a few times she came back with trinkets, which were things made of animal bones or organs. Katie's parents forbid her from going into the forest without Tyler to accompany her, and so she pouted for a few days. One day though, she came to us while we were at Tyler's house and excitedly told us about how Bali came to her in the night and told her about how he was a prince and he would make her a princess if she came outside, but for some reason he disappeared before she could go out.
That thing has been coming here every night since we first saw it.
Tyler said as soon as she left. What? I said, dumbfounded.
Yeah, it walks around our house and then sits below Katie's window for a bit. Last night it tried to open our back door, but I made sure it was locked before I went to bed.
Well, how the hell did it talk to Katie then?
I don't know, dude, but it was in Katie's room last night. I ran to her room as soon as I heard it and it disappeared. I guess it only wants her.
The story gave me goosebumps, and I made sure not to wait until even dusk to leave for my house. The visitings continued and seemed to be progressing more and more towards Katie leaving with the thing. Tyler tried to tell his parents, now more concerned for his sister's safety than his ability to explore the woods. But they laughed it off as if he had an overactive imagination. We came up with a plan one day. I would stay over Tyler's house for the night and we would trap and maybe kill the thing before it went any further. We gathered everything we could possibly need. We booby-trapped all entrances after his parents went to bed and stayed in his living room with knives from his kitchen nearby. We both must have dozed off as we were yanked awake by that thing's unnatural voice upstairs. A quick glance around showed that none of the traps went off, but somehow this thing was still inside. We grabbed our knives and ran upstairs. As we reached Katie's door, the creature never stopped talking. Still inaudible from our position, but it was clear what it wanted. Its voice almost had a gleeful tone. Tyler and I ran in without much hesitation, but were unprepared for what we met. It seemed like it might be a goat, but it stood on its hind legs. Its front legs ended in these gnarled gray-skinned human hands, and its back legs ended in similar feet. Its rib cage was visible through its fur and skin, giving it a look of death. And it smelled like it had been rotting under a hot summer sun for weeks. It turned to us, but Katie didn't. She kept her joyful gaze on the creature the whole time.
I see we have visitors. Would you like to come with us?
The ringing followed the words instantaneously, as if you had been hit in the head by something hard and heavy. Tyler charged forward and lunged at the thing with his knife. The knife landed but didn't go in. The blade bent and then snapped as Tyler went tumbling from the weight being shifted from his feet.
Many have tried that, my child. I fear it is not possible to slay me with items of this realm.
Tyler yelled for me to follow, but I was frozen by the creature's gaze. The thing slowly grabbed Katie's hand and led her out of the room. As it brushed by me, the smell of death overwhelmed me and I vomited. Tyler grabbed the knife out of my hand and chased after it. After a second of waiting, I followed him. It was already at the back door by the time I got down there. Tyler kept screaming to let her go and perhaps to alert his parents. Katie kept telling him to be quiet so she could go to her kingdom. And the creature just kept staring at us as it walked out the door without setting off the traps as it left. It seemed to be trying to remember what our faces looked like. I felt like it was looking at more than just our faces too, perhaps our souls. Tyler followed them out, shouting Katie's name as the pair reached the shadow of the woods and disappeared. Tyler didn't even hesitate as he plunged into the darkness himself. I did the only thing I thought was sensible and tried to wake his parents, who didn't hear any of the commotion from the events before. They were panicking as they called the police and went out into the woods themselves. I tried to make myself go into the woods to help the family find their child, sister. But I couldn't. The wrongness of that creature shook me to my core. So I just sat in their backyard, waiting in case Katie came back and trying to stave off thoughts of what would happen if that thing was with her. I sat for a while, hearing the increasingly distant shouts of people searching for her. My parents joined in and some other neighbors. The police did as well with some search dogs. But I just sat and waited. It might have been an hour or two before Tyler came back, and he was running at that.
Where's the map?
He shouted as he broke through the forest. I don't know, what? He shoved past me and ran into the house. He was tossing things around, frantically searched for the map.
I saw them. They were heading towards that clearing we first saw that bastard in. I just forget where it was. I want to cut them off.
I'll go with you, I finally choked out. Tyler barely nodded as he finally found the map. We set off towards the clearing we had marked out clearly on the map, if only to avoid it. The path we took was the fastest way, but rough because it didn't follow any actual trails. After collecting a fair amount of scrapes and bruises, we reached the clearing, where we saw them. The creature stood, eyes fixated on us, in the center of the clearing. Katie was slightly off to its side.
Let her go, you fucking piece of shit.
Tyler yelled as he ran forward. I followed slowly, but I believe we both noticed the hole at the same time. It was about 4 feet in diameter and had some unnatural glow coming from the bottom. Wherever that was. Whispers echoed in the clearing coming from the hole, in all different languages, some not even human.
This is your carriage, princess.
The ringing followed yet again. Katie looked into the hole, a sense of fear coming over her face.
This doesn't seem right.
Let go of her or I'll gut you right now.
The creature gave a curious look at Tyler, then glanced again at me.
I have plenty of people down there, but no princess. This is how it must be.
It stepped into the hole and dragged Katie down with it. Tyler tried to hang on, but the sudden pull on Katie made him lose his grip on her arm. Hot air pulsed out and blew both of us away from the hole. I hit my head on a tree and everything went black. I awoke to many people in the clearing, a few hovering over me but most crowded around Tyler, who was feverishly telling them what happened in tears. No one believed him, even with the 4 feet circular burn mark in the grass. The following weeks Tyler ignored me entirely. I think he blames me in part for my cowardice. I do too, to an extent, but I'm not sure what I could have done anyway. About 2 months after Katie's disappearance, I woke from a horrible dream about what was at the bottom of that hole. But then I heard the whispering. I steeled myself and looked out the window. It was Katie. She was at the edge of the woods in my yard. I slowly got out of bed and went downstairs to my back door. If I brought Katie back to Tyler, everything would be all right. Something was off about this, though. There was this ringing in my ears and faint whispers from the darkness of the woods. I opened the door and glanced out. Katie was now in the middle of my backyard, but the top of her head was missing. The edges of the hole seemed to have been made to look like a crown. She was horribly pale, and her eyes were glazed over. I knew this wasn't Katie, or wasn't anymore. But the voice that came out was hers.
Would you like to be my subject? I'll only take your left limb so you can be my jester,
she said with surprisingly lively glee. I was about to turn and run when I saw the eyes of that damned creature sitting in the void of the woods. The setup reminded me of a fisherman and a lure. Katie noticed my shift of attention.
Oh yeah, Belil's here. He wants you to come too. Don't worry, I forgive you for taking Tyler away from me.
I slammed the door shut and locked it, then ran to my bedroom and put the covers over my head. Sleep was hard to come by that night, and the whispers never stopped till dawn. Shortly after the sun came up, there was a knock on my front door. It nearly made my heart leap out of my chest. My parents answered it. It was the police, and they were hoping to ask me some questions.
Have you seen Tyler recently?
I truthfully said no.
Tyler's gone missing as of last night. The only thing we know is that there's a note supposedly with his handwriting saying he went to be his sister's knight. Do you know what this might mean?
I shivered but didn't bother trying to explain the events of last night. I wasn't sure if I had imagined them myself. My parents were terrified after that and moved within a week. We moved to a suburban town in southern Georgia, and things slowly became normal. Or at least my parents thought so. When I saw the new house, I begged my parents to find somewhere else. The house only has 1 level, and my bedroom is level with the ground. Every night I hear whispers followed by tapping on my window. I've never looked. I refuse to. It's been 10 years since we moved, and this hasn't stopped. I would have gotten used to it if it wasn't for the fact that last night I heard a knocking on my bedroom door. And my parents are out of town. I can't do it anymore. The trees are watching me with 3 pairs of hellish eyes and whispering my name every night. Maybe it's about time I got into comedy.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel, as more green texts will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check out the Odyssey page in the description for a second archive of the channel's videos.